All right, so hi, it's Tiffany again. And as you can tell by the title, I wanted I spoke about yesterday um, in regards to my family. Because after I got off from my live yesterday, I was walking around the house thinking deeply about everything, that my family has said. I am not including my mother and my father. My mother and my father have absolutely nothing to do with this. I have no animosity towards them at this moment. um, it's more so um, my mother's remaining relatives. Well, yeah, my mother's remaining relatives. Um, Now, at the time my mother passed away, she had three siblings left. Now that was the four of them out of seven. Three had died before my mother died. So let me try to remember. Two sisters and a brother passed before my mother passed. And at the time when she passed, there were the uncle I can't stand, my mother's older sister, who is a breed of crazy by herself, and um, hi Laura, and my mother's other brother. Oh fuck it, I can name names. My uncle that I can't stand is named Charles. The crazy aunt is Aunt D, Aunt Dolores, and the other neutral brother was Preston. Now, the only two left now are Charles and Dolores. My uncle Preston was unfortunately murdered. Um, hey Tracy, my uncle Preston was unfortunately murdered, and you know, to this day, it's been what 8 years since he passed, and we still don't know who did it. We still don't know who's responsible for it. Um, just that he was on the shady end of town. He lived in the shady end of town. He was hanging out with shady characters. Um, and I feel bad that happened because he was just a nice guy. He drank a little too much, but he was a nice guy. So I don't have anything bad to say about my uncle Preston at all. So he never really said, he was already like the black sheep of the family before I got that title. And I don't really have anything bad to say about him. Now, before my mother passed, she had two older sisters, my aunt Shirley and my aunt Maddie. Now, I know my aunt Maddie died from like emphysema when I was 5 because she had, she the only memories I really have of her is her being on her oxygen tank and struggling to breathe. I don't really have that many, you know, um, memories of her because, like I said, she was 5 when I died. I mean, I was 5 when she died. There we go. I'm not dead yet. I got a whole lot of living left to do. So okay, that happened with her. My aunt Shirley, I was about maybe 14 when she died. Um, and I'm not really sure why she died. I just think it was from natural causes like a heart attack or something. I don't really think it was anything crazy. So my uncle Jim, that's the oldest. I don't know if he's the oldest child or just the oldest boy. Um, he had a terrible death. Um, and to this day, I've never heard of a death like his before. But long story short, he was on drugs. He had a rotten tooth. Let one of his crackhead friends pull a tooth. The tooth got infected. It turned to gangrene. This is the first time in my life I ever heard about gangrene. And it just kind of overtook his head. I didn't see him um for maybe the last year and a half of his life because he was just so into drugs so bad. My mother didn't want to expose me to that, even though that was her brother. She didn't want to expose me to that, and um he had a really, really painful death, and it was, a really bad death. And, like a part of me wants to feel bad for him, but like, I'm gonna get to the other crap too. But this is just showing you, like, I believe in, you reap what you sow, basically. And when I was 2 or 3, this is like one of my first memories. When I was 2 or 3, um, my mother had left me with my grandmother. Now let's keep in mind, my grandmother has been paralyzed from the waist down since 1975. So let's see, I'm about 3. So this is about 1989, 1990. My mother leaves me with my grandmother. Now keep in mind, you have a 3 to 4 year old by herself, basically, and a woman in her 60s who is bedridden, with paralyzed from the waist down. So now I wasn't there by myself completely because at the time my uncle Preston lived there with my grandmother, but he was at work. But he was going to come back to the house and be back home before my mother came to get me. So I would be with an able-bodied adult in the house at some point. So while my uncle Preston was gone to work, my uncle Jim came. So like I'm 3 or 4, so I didn't really understand what was really going on until I was older and it was explained to me better. But basically, from what I gathered from what my mother and my father told me, was my uncle showed up. He wanted money for that smack. Of course, my grandmother was like, "No, I'm not giving you money to put that poison in your body because my grandmother's a big Christian. My grandmother was, she didn't drink, she didn't smoke, she didn't do any of that stuff. She was just like a one woman temperance movement. And when she refused my uncle, he started like banging on the doors, like, let me in, let me in. So little me, I was like, okay, this is family member. I start to go to the door, open the door. Medea says, that's what I call my grandmother. Medea says, no, leave him outside. Don't open the door. Don't get near the door. So now keep in mind, this is like June or July in Texas. It's hot as hell. Air conditioning and all that is on. Um, this bastard, this bastard actually went to the fucking fuse box. Now keep in mind, there's a toddler and a disabled woman, elderly disabled woman, in this particular house. This bastard goes, turns the electricity off. He goes to the fucking switch and turns the electricity off. So we're sitting in the fucking dark. So, he's steady. I just vividly remember him in the window above my grandmother's bed, because my grandmother was laying in her bed and I was in her room with her. Just in the window, like, and cussing and all that sort of shit. So my grandmother called me to her and she was like, do you know your numbers? And I was like, yes, ma'am, I do. And so she started calling out this number to me to dial, which was my Uncle Charles before he turned into a dick. She called my Uncle Charles. And, she explained to him, I think he was at work too. She called him and said, Jim Jr.'s over here. He's messed up the lights. He's turned the lights up. I'm here. Tiffany's here. Come do something. So, my uncle left his job. By the time Uncle Charles got there, Uncle Jim had hauled ass and got the fuck away. So, he came, he turned the lights and everything on. And this is where it all went downhill. Medea called my mother, who was at work. She called mom from her job cooking at the country club and was like, she explained what Jim Jr. everything did. My mother made the spectacular fucking mistake of calling my father and telling him this. Mom, why the fuck did you call Dad? She called him and told him what this fool had done. So, first of all, I don't even know where the hell my dad was. Because my dad was a jack of all trades, so he didn't have a set job that he worked. He worked for himself. Next thing I know, Dad is at the house. He's ranting and raving and everything. My dad beat my mom to her mother's house because he lived down the street from my grandmother. He beat it down the street before my mom could even get there. And he's ranting and raving and hooting and hollering, asking Jim Jr. is at, and he gonna kill Jim Jr. He said, I got my gun, I'm gonna get my gun out the car. He kept a gun, a pistol, under his car seat at all times. I've seen it. Um, and it took, by the time he got done, shouting his shit in the house, mom was there, Uncle Charles was there. Um, so he had Medea, my mother, and my mother's brother, all trying to stop him from going and killing my Uncle Jim. Had to stop him from going and killing my Uncle Jim. And, I will never forget, my mom said something to along the lines of, oh, he's gonna get his, and don't go to jail over him. Harold, she was saying that to my dad. And, finally my dad cooled down and let it go. But he really hated my uncle until the day my uncle died, and probably till the day he died himself. Um, Back to my uncle. This is where the karma jumps in for my Uncle Jim. Um, like I said, he was on that smack. Let somebody pull his teeth out with a random set of pliers. It's not like, oh, I go to the dentist and they're gonna yank my tooth. No, we just found this laying in the backyard somewhere. We're gonna yank this tooth out. Yank the tooth out, smoking crack. Um, and he ended up in the hospital with gangrene in his head. And my mother, I just remember I never saw him when he was in the hospital because I was too young to go to the hospital. You had to be 12 and over to visit somebody in the ICU, and he died the day after Christmas 1995, so I was 9. And I just remember my mother saying that when you would get up to the ICU and the elevator doors would open for the ICU, she could literally smell his gangrene from the moment the doors on the elevator opened, and he was like way like in an isolation thing in the hospital. Like it wasn't just like he was in open air. He was like stuck way in the back, and she could smell it all the way back there. And literally they just had to make him comfortable because there was, nothing you could do. I just remember my mom saying if something has gangrene on it, they usually amputate it. She's like, you can't amputate a head. That just killed somebody. So, he just basically had to have morphine drips until it was all over. And of course, it was a closed casket funeral. Okay, so that's that with Uncle Jim Jr. So my Aunt D. Before I dive back into my Uncle Charles and his hag of a wife, um, my Aunt D. That's a very rare, special breed of I can't stand you. um, like she never really personally did anything to me. It's just the way she reacted to certain situations and the way she handled certain situations rubbed me the wrong way. As a 20 something when it happened, and now me is 10, 15 years later, it still bothers me. And I still couldn't have envisioned myself reacting to these certain situations the way she reacted to them. Now there's two situations. Excuse me. There's two situations where somebody died and she completely just like dropped the ball and fucked it up in my eyes. And I know that this is stuff that happened years ago, but it's it still bothers me, and it's probably always going to bother me because I just know I personally would not have done this. Now I could be wrong. And like I say, everybody has their own way of grieving and everything. But I just don't think that the way either one of these situations went um was not appropriate. Okay, so I think it was 2002. Um my cousin Teresa died. I mentioned her yesterday, that's the one that drowned. Um Long story short, she drove her car into a flooded underpass and was unable to get out. And I've gone into detail on this before, but the day after it happened, when me and my dad were driving around trying to get me to school, we actually drove past her flooded out car, and we didn't realize it until later. And because it was still sitting in the underpass. So, Teresa died. and we were getting ready to, do her funeral and everything. So now keep in mind, my aunt lived at the time, she lived in Houston, she's in South Carolina now. And I knew she was going to kind of like separate from family because my mother's side of the family is Baptist. My father's side of the family, for the most part, is Catholic. And when my aunt Dee married her husband Roland, they were Jehovah's Witnesses, so she converted to being a Jehovah's Witness. And you know how the Jehovah's Witness beliefs go. I'm just going to leave it at that. You know how their belief system goes. Um, so Teresa died. We go to the funeral. Now I remember just in passing because, like, I was still a kid, so it was kind of grown folks' business. But my aunt Dee was like, as soon as the funeral, like the same day that they had the funeral, she and her husband were leaving to go on a cruise. So, really, I was just like, okay, if the cruise is just this fucking important, why did you even make a cameo appearance at the funeral? So I remember we do the funeral, and we're getting ready to take the body to the gravesite to bury the body and everything. And it's a funeral, everybody's in suits and dresses and stuff. I look up and see my aunt and my uncle, and they're in, like cruise wear, shorts and loafers and shit. And I'm just kind of flabbergasted that they actually changed into this clothing at the church. I swear, I even in my mind's eye, I can still see the front of Scott Olive, and with the doors open, there's a fucking hearse, there's a fucking family car, there's my aunt and uncle in their fucking shorts, and I don't even know where the hell my mother was. Um, but I know I looked at her and I said, "You're not coming to the gravesite. You're not coming to the repast after." And they're like, "No, we're going on our cruise." I don't even know if they were going. I don't remember if they were going to the Bahamas, wherever in the hell they were going. But it was just like, "Oh, this is just a stop on our vacation," and we did our peace out to the body. Now we're gonna go on our cruise and do whatever. I'm just like, really? If I just couldn't fathom seeing myself leaving a funeral of, this is your niece. I couldn't see myself leaving the funeral of my niece and jumping on a boat immediately to go wherever. I just couldn't. I couldn't do that. Like, I mean, I was just in the church house crying, so I wouldn't even be able to turn that shit off to say, "Oh, vacation time. Let's go. I want to drink a margarita or some shit." What the fuck? Like like that. Okay, that really kind of made me look at her kind of sideways. And to be honest, the whole family was kind of looking at her sideways, because the whole Jehovah's Witness thing. I mean, that's just a totally different thing. Um, so fast forward to when my mother died, and that really pissed me off. Like, okay, this is your sister. This is your younger sister. So you were there when she was born. You were there when she got married. You were there when she got divorced. My mother was married 3 times. You got married and divorced when I was born, her only child. You were there when I was born. You've seen her grow up from a kid into a grown woman, have her own family, her husband. Um, this is your sister. Okay, let's just keep this in mind. This is your fucking sister. Um, she didn't come to the funeral. I'm trying to remember if she even came when my mother was sick. Like, I don't even think she really came when my mother was sick. Um, I'm trying to remember, but that's kind of foggy as far as her. But she didn't come to the funeral. What she said was, "Oh, I just want to remember Rita the way she was." Okay, but just bear with me. You were there when Medea died. You were there when Maddie died. You were there when Shirley died. You were there when Teresa died and fucked it up. Um, you were there for every other fucking funeral, but you couldn't be there for Rita's funeral. That's my mother, for Rita's funeral. I said, okay, that's fine. So let's fast forward to about 2016, 2017, somewhere around in there, because I can't really recall the actual date. I don't really care. But my phone rang, and I answered it, and it was my aunt. Um, the uncle I can't stand, my Uncle Charles, his wife. She called me, and she said, Tiffany, you should call Dolores. And I'm like, why the hell would I want to call Aunt D? I didn't say it like that, but in my head, I'm like, why the fuck would I want to call her for any reason? And she was like, you should call her. And I'm like, why? And she's like, Roland died. So that's my uncle. So she was like, Roland died. And I was, and it's still in my head, I'm like, okay. And like, what the fuck do you want me to possibly say, or do you want me to possibly do? And before I could even do anything, this bitch merges the call to my Aunt D. So my Aunt D picked up, and I kind of had to fumble through my words for about maybe 10 minutes, trying to make it sound like, oh, I'm sorry, and I actually give a fuck when I really don't. Because okay, I'm not blood related to Roland. That's my uncle by marriage. Was he a nice guy? Yeah, he was a nice guy. But like, we weren't close. I'm not close to any of my family. Let's just keep that 100. I'm not close to any of my family. I'm probably closer to this bottle of soda than I am to any of my family members. um, so I bullshitted on the phone for about 10 minutes, and you know, my uncle Charles was like, "We're gonna go up to South Carolina, for the funeral. Do you want to come with us to the funeral?" And I was like, "No, I got dialysis. Bye." So you can play that game, yeah. Like, okay, you didn't give a shit about Teresa, you didn't give a shit about Rita. I'm not gonna give a shit about you, and I damn sure am not going to miss my dialysis to play pretend and to fuck with y'all. No, absolutely not. And I went to dialysis the next day. And I don't even think I even mentioned it to them in dialysis because they wouldn't know my Uncle rolling from a hole in the ground. So they do know my Uncle Charles. And at this point I've explicitly said I don't want to see him. If he ever comes into dialysis asking for me, I'm not there. Just, I want absolutely nothing to do with him. And I've told Ebony, even to the point of where if I die, God forbid anything happened to me where I actually expire and die, I do not want him at the funeral. I don't want him anywhere near the funeral. I don't want him at the funeral. I don't want him, at graveside. I don't want him anywhere near my earthly remains. So, okay. Now, the time that I enjoyed, um, Carmen action from my Aunt Janice. That's my Uncle Charles' wife. Uh, Now I said before that when I was with these people for 6 months, I mean not 6 months, 6 weeks. God, if I had been there for 6 months, I would have burnt the house down. But 6 weeks, um, I felt like I was not welcome there. And I think even if you go through my old videos, you will find a video of me that I shot when I was at their house saying I don't feel welcome here anymore. So, um, it was really little things at first that kind of hinted at, okay, maybe these people don't like me as much as they're putting on. Excuse me. And it really came to a head one day at church. Now, the way that I explained this, and I'm going to continue to explain this until the day I die, is that I think that they were trying to show off at church and, bring me in and kind of try to mold me into this sort of like little Christian Stepford wife type thing, um, where I'm like this little perfect Christian person who just, you know, cleans and reads the Bible and, does everything you're supposed to do and, blah, blah, blah. I was 29, fully grown with my own mind. Um, okay, first of all, let's break down Aunt Janice. That was so much fun. Now, what happened one Sunday? It happened to be a communion Sunday. I know for Catholics they have communion every single time they have church, every single mass. But for most Baptist churches, you only do communion once a month. And this happened at one of the first, one of the communion dates for that particular month. So, in the middle of the church service, I started taking with a migraine. Now, normally, when I come down with a migraine, everything for me stops. I have to leave wherever I am. If I'm in dialysis, I have to get off dialysis and come home. If I'm at the store, I have to put everything back or just leave the basket, come home, lay down in the dark, take ibuprofens, and just try to sleep off the worst of it. So, I wasn't feeling well, but my aunt wasn't near me at that particular time. My aunt was someplace else. I can't remember where the hell my aunt was. But I started taking with a migraine. So her friend, who's also a family friend of my mother, her friend Bernadette was sitting next to me, and I wrote a little note and handed it to her. And it said like, I don't feel well. I feel sick. Get my aunt. So my aunt came, and I told her, I said, Aunt Janice, I'm having a migraine. I don't feel good. Now I totally, completely expected her to. My aunt is a fucking nurse. Let's keep that in perspective. My aunt is a fucking nurse, and she's been a fucking nurse. She retired in 2017. She retired then after like 35 years of being a fucking nurse. So, this isn't something that's unusual to her. This isn't something that's new to her. She should know what the fucking protocol for a migraine is. Okay, what the fuck did she do? Did she put me in the car and bring me back home, or at least even let me sit in the car outside in the quiet? No, she moved me to the very back row of, what the hell is Donald Trump on my TV? um Moved me all the way to the back of the church. Now keep in mind, this is an active church service, so you got loud music going, drums, percussion, guitar, bass, everything going on, people hooping and hollering, people saying. It is not a good environment to be having a headache in, especially one where it's so bad you feel like you're about to vomit. So, I sat and I suffered for like another 45 minutes where I had to take communion anyway. And, finally, once everything was said and done and all over, I get into the car with my Aunt Janice. I don't know why my Uncle Bubba stayed. That's what we call Uncle Bubba. I don't know why my Uncle Charles stayed behind. I think he just wanted to talk to the pastor for something. I don't know. I don't care. But as we were leaving, my aunt turned to me and she said, maybe it would be better if you stayed with Diane and them. Those are my cousins. That she's not blood related to. These are the children of my mother's older sister, Maddie. She was like, maybe you should stay with Diane and them. They don't really go to church. My head still feels like I have an elephant on a jackhammer in it. But I remember I felt it right then. I need to get the fuck out of this house. I need to get the fuck out of this house. I need to get to my own place. I need to get the fuck away from these people. These people do not give a fuck about me. And, I literally, in that instance, driving out of the Baptist church parking lot, um, you know, I just stopped giving a damn about them because I'm like, they don't give a shit about me. I'm here in physical pain. Not once did this bitch ever tried to comfort me in any way. She thought that I was trying to get out of going to church. So, I was highly pissed with her among other things, but this pissed me off the most. And this sticks out in my head the most, damn fly. And let me see, I'm trying to think. So this wasn't even a week later. This wasn't even a week later. Now I remember my aunt and my uncle talking, and in the meantime, I'm trying to find an apartment, and trying to find an apartment, trying to get stuff together with FEMA, all that sort of stuff, get the house checked out and everything, so I can get a check cut and get the fuck out of there. Um, so in the meantime, my aunt was now I'm the type of person who likes like right now the way I am, pajamas in front of a fan, chilling on my computer, watching TV. Um, like I could, if I didn't have to go to the houses, I could do this until times got better. I could just do this until the end of days. So, I mean, this is comfortable to me. This is like my comfort zone and what I enjoy doing. And they just couldn't seem to wrap their heads around that I liked being to myself. I'm used to being to myself. Um, that's just how I am. I'm an introvert. I can have my good extrovert moments, but generally I'm an introvert. Anyway, my aunt comes to the door to the little guest room I'm staying in, and she asks me, um, "Do I want to go to the store with her?" And I said, "No, ma'am. Um, I'm doing something here. I wasn't doing shit. I was just on YouTube assing around. I just did not want to be in her company." So she said, "Okay," and she left. Now, keep in mind, prior to everything that happened, my aunt had had knee replacement surgery. And And I mean, it was still fairly new. Like I can literally see the scars on her knee from the procedure. So, like I said, I didn't think nothing else about it. I go on about my business in the room on the computer, messing about, texting 3T or whatever. So, a couple hours later, my aunt comes back home and she's limping. So, I was like, hey, are you okay? And she's like, "No, I'm not." So what happened was, my aunt is one of those people who, if she's on her phone, she don't hear shit else. If she's on her phone, she was on her phone talking about her dad. Got out of her car at the HEB, and you know how they have those little cement stopper blocks in the parking lot that everybody, wheels are supposed to be flush against when they park. Yeah, she parked on that and was walking and talking on her phone and not paying attention to where in the fuck she was going, and she fell and busted her ass and fucked up her knee. She fucked up her knee so bad that I think like it shifted one of the screws from the replacement surgery, and she had to go back and have a completely different procedure now. Like she fucked up her knee and she fucked up her ankle. Um, but by the time all that happened, I was in my apartment, so she was not my concern. But I sat and I thought about it after everything had went on, and I was like, "No, see, she treated me like trash today. I had a headache, and I mean, the Lord just threw her down. I didn't have to do jack shit to her. She fell down on her own." So that was delicious. I enjoy that every time I think about that. And and my uncle, okay, Uncle Charles. Now, this is a man. Now, I ain't got room to talk because I've struggled with my weight my entire life. I know I look puffy now, but this is fluid because I didn't go to dialysis today because Zoom meeting. But my uncle is trying to lose weight, and he's been trying to lose weight. He used to be very, very skinny. He used to be like Michael Jackson skinny, back in the day, like when he was like a teenager in his early 20s. He was like really, really slim, and all this southern food jumped on his ass quick. That's one thing I will say for his wife, that she is a good cook. She does cook pretty good food. Um, but that's nothing. Everybody from Louisiana can cook. So that's like saying the sky is blue. But So, just there's just so much stuff about my fucking uncle that just gets on my nerves. And there's some stuff that I can't understand. Like me, I said, "Oh, I need to go on a diet. Oh, I need to lose weight before I go to Encino." Now, logically, that would be me cutting my portion sizes, trying to get away from fast food. I got frozen meals finally. Um, trying to incorporate more salads. Lighter food. Just, try to eat clean and eat better food for my, to try to encourage weight loss and all that sort of stuff. What the fuck does my uncle do? He has a treadmill. He gets up and he runs on a treadmill every day for an hour in the morning. I know because I heard him. And, it's like feed five full fall when he's running. And, you would say, oh, you would think, oh, that's so good that he's doing that. And, he's exercising and he's, burning his calories and everything. No, because in the same day, every single day, he will go drive to Church's Chicken, which is for the people who don't know what it is, it's a fried chicken place like Kentucky Fried Chicken. What other chicken places are there? Well, basically everybody knows KFC, so it's on par with that. But I prefer their chicken because it tastes better to me. But he will go to Church's Chicken and get 3 fried chicken breasts, deep fried, fat fried chicken breasts, and sometimes he'll eat. Now, if you order chicken like that, you automatically get a little honey butter biscuit with it. And, sometimes he'll eat that before. Now, he's a trucker. So he's really literally sitting on his ass for hours and hours at a time driving a big rig. Um, so he's eating this. And, when I first saw him do it, I was just like, okay, he's eating chicken. He must have just had a taste for chicken today. No, this Negro is going and going to get this chicken every single day. Like he's going every single day and getting 3. He will come home. Okay, sorry, my connection got interrupted. Home, and I say home, I mean his house. He would come home, and my aunt will have something like spaghetti or something, and he would eat that with the chicken. So there's unknown amounts of whatever in the hell calories is in whatever his wife cooked, plus these 3 pieces of chicken. Like what the fuck? And he's wondering why he is diabetic. He's wondering why he had a colon cancer scare. He's wondering why he's fat. Uh, Gee, it could be that fucking chicken you keep stuffing away. Like I had fried chicken a few days ago. I'm probably not gonna eat fried chicken again until sometime way in the middle of this month. So that's if I feel like it. So, but the more I think about it, the more I just and if he's so pissed with me about the reason that I think he's pissed, this man can hold on to a grudge like grim death if that's why. Okay. Now I've stated over and over, I'm the only child from my mother and my father. So when my mother got really, really sick towards the end of her life, I was about 20, 21 years old. Now, at the point in time when my mother died, the main adults in my life were my father, of course, Uncle Charles, Aunt Dolores, and Uncle Preston. My mother's siblings and her husband. And out of all the people that my mother could have chosen to say, hey, carry out my final wishes, she chose me, 20, 21-year-old me, over her husband, over her siblings. And I guess my uncle thought that he was just like super close to my mom. And I guess he was always kind of salty that she didn't put her life into his hands. She put her life into my hands. And I just I think about that so much and have thought about reflected on it so many times in my life. And I'm being completely serious and completely honest right now. Um, it's just like you had your husband, you had your siblings, and she put her life in my hands. And the thing that annoys the fuck out of me is that everybody, with the exception of my father, everybody tried to play me off like I'm not smart, like I'm an idiot, like I'm naive or whatever. Like I say, don't let the face and the makeup fool you. I'm intelligent under all this. Um, and I said, my mother must have really trusted me and trusted my judgment above that to put the responsibility of her life on me. You know, every single phone call that came from the hospital, they wanted my permission. I was, what do they call it? Power of attorney. Can we do this procedure? Do we have your permission to, administer this antibiotic? I mean, they was calling me at all hours of the day, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Ms. Butler, do we have your permission to do X, Y, and Z with your mother? Do we have permission to put her tracheotomy in? Do we have permission to try to start dialysis with your mother? Do we have permission to um do this procedure? Do we have, I mean, just every time I turned around, it was somebody asking for my permission to do something at 20 and 21. So even when my mother died, um, the phone rang, my father answered the phone. They didn't tell him, hey, your wife just passed away. They were like, can we speak to Tiffany Butler? And, my dad came, woke me up. I was sleeping. He came, woke me up. And, that's how I learned my mother passed, because they couldn't even like legally tell my father. They had to tell me since I was power of attorney. Um, so yeah, and I mean, this opens up a whole new wound with my uncle of why he gets on my nerves. And my friend Ebony, if you were in the Zoom, you saw her with me today. This is how my friend Ebony knows I was not bullshitting or anything. She wasn't with me when my father died. I don't know, like we drifted apart after high school, and then we became friends again. Um, but that's a different story for a different day. So, my mother died. Now, keep in mind, this is his sister. Just like I said with my aunt Dolores, this is his fucking sister. So I called him and I said, we lost mom. Just put it simply, we lost mom. So he starts crying on the phone like a bitch, and um, he never came to the house. Now this is his sister. I'm his niece. I just lost my mother, and he knows what it's like because Medea died. So he knows what it's like to lose his mother. Um, he didn't show up. He didn't show up at my house. He didn't come to my house, and it was me and my dad and one of my dad's like adopted kids came over and was saying she was sorry. Um, but he didn't show up to my house. Period. At all. I didn't see him until like 2 or 3 days later when we were trying to get the obituary together to put it in the paper. So, and I wrote the obituary. I wrote the eulogy and delivered the eulogy at my mother's funeral. I also wrote my dad's obituary and delivered his eulogy at his funeral. Okay. So now he also tried to argue with me at the fucking funeral home. This is my Uncle Charles. He's trying to argue with me because when we do the obituary, we talk about who's um, the remaining family members that's still alive and where everything and where they live at and everything. So I said my aunt lives in X town in South Carolina. My uncle was adamant that she lived in this fucking other town in South Carolina. I have my mother's black book somewhere here, and I don't feel like digging for it, but it has my mother's handwriting in it, and she wrote her sister's address and her phone number and the town. So I we had he was so adamant, and he fucked it up, and we had to reprint and re-put out the obit notice because my uncle was wrong and I was right about what town my Aunt Dolores lived in. And I mean, at any time, he could have picked up the fucking phone, called long distance, and said, Dolores, what town do you live in? And he was just adamant it was Spartanburg. She lives in fucking Columbia. Not even close. And okay, so there was that. He pissed me off with that. So dad's death comes around. Ebony was with me that day. Because we were supposed to go to the fair. And before we left for the fair, the call came in that my father was having a heart attack and they were shipping him from the nursing home to the hospital. So, I was freaking out. I called Ebony and said, I didn't even know what the hell I said. I just know I was screaming. I can laugh now, but I know I was just wanting to fuck up then. And we get to the hospital, we get down, we run to the emergency room, and they had just dropped him off. Because I remember I asked the medic, I said, "Did you drop off, Harold Butler?" And he was like, "Yeah." I said, "I'm his daughter." I said, um, "Can you get us in?" Because you couldn't go to that particular door; that was just for the ambulance. And he was like, "You're his daughter." I was like, "Yeah, I'm his daughter. I'm his only daughter." So he went and he did something, and he got me and Ebony in. So long story short, Dr. Cousin tells us, they did everything they could. They tried. They couldn't save him. You know, I'm snotting. Ebony's snotting. Um, so I had my phone with me, but I didn't really have too many numbers memorized. I just knew my uncle's number. So I said, let me call my uncle. I called my uncle. Now I called my friend Stacy first. She wasn't there, but she was sad, but she was out of town because she had moved. I think she was with her now husband, but she had moved out of state. But I called her and let her know, and she was sad. She said she was sorry and everything. Um, I called my uncle and I said, "Now keep in mind, only child. This is my last parent. This is the only parent I have." Because I remember sobbing to the doctor. He was all I had left. He was all I had left. He was all I had left. I just can remember that so vividly, crying and the doctor being on his knees at my side, holding my hand and looking sad. And, I called my uncle. And in the meantime, while I'm calling my uncle, Ebony's calling her mother, to tell her what happened. And Ebony's mother showed up. My uncle never showed up. I spoke directly to my uncle. I said, Uncle Bubba, um, I'm at the hospital. Dad just died, you know, yada, yada, yada. And, I fully expected him to come see about me. I expect him to come to the hospital. Like, okay, this kid is now an orphan. It didn't matter that I was 29, whatever. Um, you know, lost my father, the only parent I had left. And he never showed. And Ebony could testify to that. He never showed. And if I could drag Stacy in for the other one, for my mom, he never showed for mom. So I don't know what the fuck his deal was. Um, so that pissed me off a lot because that was, how do you not just come to support somebody, especially if they've lost their parent? Now, I will say when my friend Ebony, her father, unfortunately passed away 2 months before mine, but he was in Houston, and I was unable to be there at her side. But of course, I called her. I said I was sorry. I did what I feel any friend would do if something like that happens to somebody. You show your support some type of way. And I also went to her father's funeral. You show your support. Um, my uncle didn't really show any support. He didn't really do anything. So now back to my mother. Um, because I just think I'm madder at him over his own sister than my father. That was his brother-in-law, but his his sister is what just really eats me the fuck alive sometime at night. I mean, I'm just spilling all the tea right now. But I need to, I guess I need to get this off my chest. Um before my trip, so I can have a clear conscience and not have that weighing down on me. Um so he didn't show up for my mom. He didn't he argued with me about, the stuff for the obituary. Um I basically had to choose everything for my mother when she died. Just keep in mind, I'm 21 years old doing all this. My mother died 8 days before my 22nd birthday. I'm 21 years old. I'm picking out a casket. I'm picking out a headstone. I'm picking out a plot. Um, Telling my cousin Spooky how to do her makeup. My mother doesn't wear makeup, so like I have a whole lot of makeup on. My mother would never wear this much makeup. How to do her hair for this. Um, I mean, the only thing they fucking contributed was a pair of little pearl earrings. Everything else, I hand chose by myself because my dad was too shell shocked to do shit. Which I can't blame him. Y'all been together 33 years, and all of a sudden she's gone. And it wasn't until my mother died that I realized my father fully expected that no matter how bad it got, that he expected my mother was going to come home eventually. Even though she had been in the hospital for so long, he completely expected my mother to come home at some point and not go home in the end. So he was just kind of out of sorts, and I had to do everything. So, my friend Stacy came to the funeral with me for my mother. Um, Now, this was another fight I wanted to have. Now, Stacy was with me all the time when my mother was sick. If I was doing something for my mother was like, Tiff, you know, go get me a soda. I go into the kitchen and turn around. There's Stacy there. She's begging me, asking me, can I take it to your mom for you? Can I help you? She was just up every single time wanting to help. And, I'm indebted to her for that forever. Um, so when mom's funeral came around, Stacy was the first person at the house. It was me and my dad still getting dressed for the funeral. Knock on the door, Stacy's the first person there. And, she even helped me tie my dad's tie for the services. Um, I mean, like, Stacy's like a sister to me. And so when we come to the part where we get to the church and, the family goes and views the body and everything, Stacy wanted to be next to me. And I turned around and asked my dad. I said, "Dad, is it okay if Stacy walks with us?" My dad was like, "Yeah, sure." Because my dad, Stacy's biracial, but my dad used to call her his white daughter. So, we're lining up, and my uncle, who has no previous knowledge of Stacy what the fucking ever, um, sees her standing next to me, and he's mad that Stacy's next to me and saying like, "Well, she can't walk in with us. She can't sit with us. She's not family, blah blah blah, whatever." And I turned around, like I said, I turned around and looked at my dad. I was like, "Dad, can Stacy walk with us?" I made sure I asked him where my uncle could hear me. I said, "Dad, can Stacy walk with us?" And Dad was like, "Yeah, whatever." My dad didn't give a shit. He was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." Stacy walked with us. Bet money Stacy sat next to me in the front row. Now Dad disappeared because he couldn't handle seeing Mom in the box. But I understood that. But I mean, the whole time, Stacy was there the whole time. And my uncle was mad, and he could stay mad till the day he died. I don't give a shit. Because that was my friend, and that was the one person. Like, we would go to the hospital to see my mother when she was in the ICU. Stacy knew we left there at 2 o'clock every afternoon. She knew we left there at 2 o'clock. 2:01, my phone is ringing. How's your mom? How's she doing? Is she getting better? That's Stacy. Stacy didn't have to do shit, but she did. I mean, every single day, 2 o'clock on the dot. How's your mom? How's she doing? Tell her I said hi. Tell her I love her. Stacy even came up there, and I remember my mother couldn't even recognize none of the rest of her family. But when she looked and she saw Stacy, she said, "Hey, Stacy," just like it was a normal fucking day. Like she instantly recognized Stacy. She didn't recognize none of my cousins. She could recognize me, of course, and she could recognize my father, but she couldn't recognize none of the rest of the family. She recognized Stacy though. That says a lot. Okay, so when my father died, like I said, Stacy wasn't here because Stacy was, with her now husband. But Ebony was here. So I had absolutely no help other than Ebony, bless her heart. And like I said, she was bereaved because she lost her father 2 months before mine in the same year, 2015. Um, so, I'm planning this funeral by myself. I'm doing all this by myself. This damn fly is killing me. I'm almost done. But shit. It's just that's an alarm going off. It's just gonna have to play. But she's just like, now let's keep this in mind. Ebony and Stacy are two independent women. They are not related to me in any capacity. We're not blood related in any way. You know, if they turned around and walked away right now and we never spoke to each other again, that would just happen. But I mean, I'm just saying that to illustrate the point that these women didn't have to do anything. You know, Stacy didn't have to throw her hat in the ring like she did when my mom died. Ebony didn't have to throw her hat in the ring like she did when my dad died. But these two women stepped up to the plate and, they saw I was in my time of need and they were selfless and came to my aid. And, it's remarkable that two people who were not related at all are closer to me. I consider them closer and my family over my actual blood relatives because, you know, you can't choose your family. You can choose your friends. Um, I didn't choose the shit show that I currently have. Um, but I did choose Stacy and I chose Ebony and he chose me. Um, and I think we all chose well. And, I don't know. This is the only thing that bothers me moving forward is, someday I do want to have a significant other. I do want to have a child or a stepchild or adopt a child or something. And the thing that's going to be very, very difficult for me to instill and teach is that closeness of family. Because all of mine have shown their asses. And, if they were on fire, I wouldn't piss on them to put them out. I mean, that's just how I feel in regards to them. I just really have no sense of connection with them other than a name. I just look at them like, okay, you're my mom's brother, you're my mom's sister. Um, you know, like that. Now, my dad's side of the family had some wild ones, but I'm not going into that because the only one I ever had any trouble with was my Aunt Teresa. And that was the only time my mother ever wanted to whip somebody's ass because of me. But that's a different story for a different day. And my nose is stuffed up. And alarms everywhere going off. So, yeah, I have to go now. But yeah, that's kind of the tea about my aunts, my uncle, why I don't get along with them, why I don't like them. That's it. And I've been talking for an hour. And if you listen to me for the whole hour, you deserve a cookie. All right, so have a good evening. Stream something Jackson. Bye. And now I sound like Weezy Jefferson because I need a drink of water.